Good morning, Dan and Amy. And thinking about 48 hours from now when President Trump announces his selection to replace RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and how quickly that nomination will be taken up and shepherded through the Senate by Mitch McConnell. We shall see. But perhaps still some reflections on Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her jurisprudence before we get to whether it's going to be Amy Coney Barrett or Barbara Lagoa or somebody else on President Trump's shortlist. To help us cover both matters, we're pleased to be joined by Kenneth Starr, Judge Starr. He served as a judge, including with Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the D.C. Circuit, as well as U.S. Solicitor General and, of course, special counsel in the Whitewater investigation of President Clinton. He's the author of the forthcoming book, Religious Liberty in Crisis, Exercising Your Religious Freedom in an Age of Uncertainty. That's due out next spring, and that timely issue. And the next court is going to take up a religious liberty issue, as we've discussed this week. Judge Starr, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Dan. Thank you.
Well, before we get to the future, the very near future, some reflection on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You offered a very nice piece on her in the Wall Street Journal. It seemed like you had a relationship with her. Maybe you didn't go to the opera with her like Scalia did, but you had a good relationship with her too, even though you're coming from different philosophies of jurisprudence.
Yeah, I never sang Wagner to Ruth, but she had a very nice singing voice. I can stay on tune. Nino had a great voice, just as Scalia. And I think their relationship really embodied and reflected the reality inside our courthouse, which is we were friends. So you can, it's a great lesson for America. You can disagree, America, without being so bloody disagreeable. As we used to say, chill out, right? And so Ruth would be a chill out kind of person. She would never lose her temper. I'm sorry, I'm a little hoarse this morning.
Oh,
and was just a gracious and kind human being. And she didn't let professional disagreements get in the way of something that was more important to her in terms of interpersonal relations. She really believed in the idea, Dan and Amy, of collegiality. Let's be friends.
Yeah.
We can disagree, but let's be friends.
Now, is there one story in particular that you could share with us about time that you spent with her?
Well, I have many, so it's hard to pick out one, but I'll just say this. As I tried to say in that article, I just recall this time and time again. When something would happen to the court family, to a member of the court family, a bereavement, a loss in life, or a happy occasion, let's call it joys and concerns, the mantra was, ask Ruth. She'll know what to do. So she was kind of our class mom, our class sister, big sister, right? And guiding us, this was the right thing to do. And then we all loved what I affectionately call the clubhouse, which was her lovely Watergate apartment. She was a public servant, but her late husband, Marty, was a fantastic tax lawyer. So he made the income that resulted in their having a glorious apartment in the Watergate building. All your listeners will remember Watergate, or at least know about it from history. Absolutely gorgeous, and they were wonderful, convivial entertainers. Now, that having been said, Marty was the star of the show, raconteur, great chef, and Ruth was shy. And that was very charming about her. And you would have to really sort of strain to listen to her. No booming, domineering voice or something. And so she was really an exquisite human being who genuinely cared for people. Of course, she was passionate about the issue of women's equality. That was her guiding principle, her professional calling.
And some of the comments, I mean, just one more on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The comments that she made that were fairly aggressive for a sitting Supreme Court justice to make in the direction of President Trump, that she sort of later walked back. Do you think that was just uncharacteristic of her, but it's a sign of the times and how politicized everything's become, or was that just her speaking her mind, and if she felt like she needed to take, expands Supreme Court norms to actually make commentary on a sitting president, then that was all fine.
Well, judge not that you be not judged, but I guess I do have an opinion. I don't think that Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the Court of Appeals would have dared say something like that because she knew it was inappropriate, so it was undoubtedly the spur of the moment. But, the president gets people riled up.
Yes,
right?
we've seen.
People have just strong reactions. And so I'm very glad that she walked it back. That's the key. It's one of those, I repent. I shouldn't have said it.
When you have got a forthcoming book on religious liberty in this country, and there's a forthcoming case that we've talked about all week that will be taken up by the High Court next term on religious liberty. And so the importance of this pick by President Trump in advance of protecting religious liberty that is under assault from every direction, and perhaps Amy Coney Barrett is the best embodiment of just how vicious the assault is going to be.
Well, it's going to be a very direct attack on her faith. The dogma lives within you. Dianne Feinstein's really infamous comment. I mean, why use a term that's so loaded, dogma? So let's face it, we live in a time of secularist hostility to religion. Groups have been formed to challenge and bring legal challenges to long-standing traditions and practices and so forth. And it's so antithetical to our traditions as a free people. One of the most liberal justices ever to serve, William O. Douglas, wrote this, we are a religious people whose institutions presuppose a supreme being. And he wrote that in the context of accommodating the practice of many school districts at the time of allowing students to leave in public schools, obviously, to leave school one day a week, an hour earlier to undergo religious training. It started in New York, and you just walk down the street and you're at your parish church or wherever. And we have really shifted, and that's one of the things I wanted to call attention to in the book, that we now have to be quite vigilant, and we have to become warriors, peaceful warriors. We don't need to burn down the streets and businesses. This is happening, in Louisville and across America these days. But we have to be willing to do, I'll use a Christian reference, the Apostle Paul. He did not hesitate to litigate. He stood up and defended himself, and he knew how, I'm an appellate lawyer, he knew how to say, I appeal. Right? He appealed to Caesar. I hope people know what I'm talking about. If they don't, it's a sign of biblical illiteracy, which is another sign of the secular age. So we've got to be vigilant to protect our religious liberties, not to coerce anyone, coerce no one, respect everyone's faith tradition or non-faith tradition. You should be protected in your beliefs or your unbeliefs, but also in your religious practice, unless they're the most compelling reasons to step in and regulate, such as child abuse and the like. Okay, final point in this whole thing. Look at what's happening in church closures across the country, right? In so many states, the most notorious that I know of is Nevada, that actually favored casinos over churches.
Right. Unbelievable.
Right? I'm not talking about staying open. I'm saying, okay, churches, you can meet. It's not like Mayor de Blasio. You are in New York. You are closed. And if you come in here, we may close you permanently. Well, he had to walk back from that. But it just shows a frame of mind, right? And we have to be vigilant, and we have to go into, shall I say, we have to preserve, protect, and defend religious liberty, the words of the Constitution, the words that the President of the United States and that all federal officers, in that oath or affirmation, we've got to preserve, we've got to protect, and we've got to defend religious liberty. That's what the book is about.
Speaking of the President of the United States, if you were advising and counseling President Trump on how to make a determination between three very qualified jurists, say Amy Coney Barrett and Barbara Lagoa and one of the others on his short list, what would you say? What are the qualities or the things he should be thinking in making that determination?
Easy to say, hard to do. take the long view. Don't go for what might be right now in a bitterly contested presidential election year the more prudent political choice. Take the long view. That person, by God's grace, will serve for 30 years or perhaps even longer. You will be gone. You'll be long gone, but your legacy in that person will live on. What kind of legacy will that be? So take the long view. Take the person who best embodies those qualities, aspirations, and visions that you have articulated and embodied then in the list, first in 2016, and now the list of 40 here in 2020. Take the long view. Don't go for a politically expedient appointment.
So should things like, Allison Jones Rushing, who's only 38 years old, U.S. Court of Appeals, the Fourth Circuit, very distinguished record for such a young woman. Should something like she's only 38, another 10 years of seasoning like Amy Coney Barrett has, or 14 years like Barbara Lagoa has, is probably better? Or per your take the long view, should, age and those sort of considerations just be off the table? If she meets the quality threshold, it should be all about who you think will have that legacy that you're talking about.
But I would weigh in that particular evaluation, experience does count.
Okay.
It's one of the factors to be weighed in the balance, because you have more of a track record, and much more importantly, that person has more of life experience, more of a chance to think and reflect on the great issues. Call it a maturation. You do not want the greening of the person, right? on the Supreme Court of the United States. Oh, I just had a great epiphany. I didn't have a rather developed view on this very important issue of the meaning of the First Amendment, the meaning of religious liberty. But now I'm learning. Well, we don't need too much learning on the job.
Well, right.
We need open-mindedness.
Yes.
But we need that experience, and I would just call mature and sober judgment is very important.
And this is something too where there's some difference of opinion. When because this is inherently a political process, a record versus not a record. Some argue, including conservatives, that it's better to have a blank slate, so less for opponents to grab onto. Others, like me and I think you, argue no, an expansive record is as expansive as possible, so you minimize the chance for surprise.
Exactly. I'm in Dan's. I'm in your camp.
Okay.
So I vote with you. Why would you go with a blank slate? That strikes me as really quite odd. We'll head to Las Vegas and see what happens. No, the stakes are just too high.
He is Judge Kenneth Starr, served as judge on US Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, U.S. Solicitor General, of course, Whitewater prosecutor in the Clinton era. The forthcoming book, spring of next year, Religious Liberty in Crisis, Exercising Your Religious Freedom in an Age of Uncertainty. Judge Starr, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.